Mr. Kokesh, can you tell us what purpose the modern US military serves? Because after all, you were once a part of this machine.
Legitimate defense was the militia defense. So when you say the American military, I can't remember the exact words that you used, would be defending only its territory or our territory. Well, it's like whose territory? And you have to understand what war is. Wars are something that we are lied to about from a very, very early age without even knowing about it when we're told that wars are fought between countries. And it's absolutely not true. Wars are conducted by governments to expand their protection rackets. And when you tell your government, yeah, please rule me and govern me and tax my income and subject me to your monopoly services, that makes you a really juicy target for another government to come in and govern you. So having a military actually makes you less safe. And I don't mean just in the sense of my experience in Iraq, where we literally made enemies faster than we could kill them because that's how the war on terror has been engineered. But in the sense that having a standing army makes the American people vulnerable to that very standing army is what the founders warned us about. And they knew this from their experience in Europe, that standing armies, raised allegedly to defend the people, ended up enslaving them. And that was the words those were the words that James Madison used. And I would say that the founders were right when they asserted that the only legitimate defense of a population is the militia defense, and that the best defense of any people is a well-armed population that refuses to be governed by anyone.
Preach. Yeah, I think that is a really well thought out response, and I'm definitely. I kind of agree, but so to maybe clarify a bit, I have a follow-up question. I don't know if you heard, but it was speculated, and let's just assume that it's true, that North Korea's missile attempt that exploded back in the early days, back just recently it exploded. That was supposedly a cyber attack by the United States. I would call that military. I would call it the army. Would you but that kind of thing really can't be achieved with a militia. So how do you feel about that?
Okay, I didn't follow the exact example. I'm sorry, I was distracted by the sound notifications I'm getting here on TeamSpeak. But your question was basically, how do we defend against cyber attacks, right?
No. Sorry, I was just saying that the missile was exploded in the air because of a United States targeted cyber attack, according to the United States press. I don't think that kind of thing would be possible if we had a bunch of militias. Do you have any kind of rebuttal to that argument?
First of all, if we had just a bunch of militias, who would North Korea be attacking in the first place? Second of all, the idea of a militia really just means that you have a force capable of violent defense that is not organized by government. And I think you would have much more efficient defense. In fact, every observation of the free market backs up my assertion in this, that if there were a market demand because there was a legitimate threat, we would have much more efficient and effective defense with the free market rather than with the government monopoly.
I am 100% in agreement with that.
Adam, how has the YouTube monetization algorithm silencing libertarian voices affected your own YouTube channel?
Yeah, well, my story with YouTube has been like one of the hidden nightmares of YouTube, because in 2013 was when I was doing a 3-hour daily podcast and a 20-minute daily video show on top of that, and I was getting about 2 million views a month consistently and getting about $3 per 1,000 views. So I was making $6,000 a month with that on YouTube, and I just hired a couple people. And then my revenue was cut by 2/3 without warning, because they gave people, and this is my understanding, but this is a guess essentially, that because I had weed, marijuana as tags in all of my videos as default tags, they gave advertisers the option to, or their default option for advertisers became avoid controversial topics. So then all of a sudden there weren't any ads playing on my channel. On at least most of my videos. So that was the first one. And then about a year ago, my revenue went down again by about 2/3. And then I was making like 30, 40 cents per 1,000 views. and getting about 1 million views a month on just my old videos. And I thought I had, I was like set for retirement. I've built an archive. I'm going to make revenue off the residuals for the rest of my life. At least I'll have $1,000 a month. And then that fell out too. And then you've all heard of the drama recently with channels just getting blanket demonetized. Well, in my case, of the remaining whatever videos that I had monetized, they just cut like a third of them. And I was just like, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I even sent my partner network an email to say, hey guys, you can just take me off your rolls. I'm demonetizing my YouTube channel. And they sent me this long email like, oh, well, you could do this, and 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 you could check your earnings here, and you could track your earnings per video there, and you could change your keywords. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, I'm not jumping through hoops for the Google machine that's owned by Hillary Clinton supporters now. That's bullshit. Like, I don't want to play anymore. And so when I saw DTube as the add-on for Steemit, I was like, all right, I got a new home for video production now. And it's kind of like a bittersweet separation. And but I think it's clearing the way for something a lot more beautiful, that whether or not it's Steemit or DTube, some form of open source social networking is going to replace Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and all of that. And it's really just a matter of time.
Well, DTube is based on IPFS, which I think is fine. But yeah, I love DTube. I'm so happy to hear that you're a Steemit user, man. I work at Steemit.
Oh, that's awesome. Who are you?
I'm Nate. I don't know. I go by Nate in all the Steemit chats. But I'm Pico Kernel on Steemit too. I'm a blockchain developer there.
Awesome.
Cool.
So is it that easy to build out extra platforms on Steemit? Like, would we be able to see someone making like a Steemit interface program that would be able to control feed from other social media as well, to have status updates, to have messaging, things like that?
Well, so what's interesting is, yeah, it's the back end functions as a really good database layer, and there's a lot of modularity. Like you can basically build whatever interface you want on top of it. I built like a Twitter clone when Steemit was first getting popular, and yeah, basically you can build a lot of different platforms, but it's not extremely modular. But I will yes, sorry for the vague answer.
Guys.
So what are your guys' thoughts for the long-term prospects for Steemit? Does it have a chance to be the new decentralized social media?
Well, I am personally invested. I know that we have some products that are coming out that I'm excited about, but I don't want to shill, right? I don't want to shill because I work there.
Then it's your job to shill.
Well, I almost got kicked out of here last time.
No need to shill.
Oh,
But Flibber, what's up, Flibber?
Well, TLDR, there is this thing called smart media tokens that are coming out, and I really do not know how much of it is public at this time. But the smart media tokens, you can look up Steemit smart media tokens, and we're hoping that that's gonna be really good for incentivizing existing companies to migrate over to Steemit. And we're hoping for a good turnkey solution, So I personally believe that I think we have some really smart people working at Steemit, and I know for a fact that we are coming out with some, I don't know. I'm invested in it, yeah.
Hey, Kokesh, it's Flibber. I have been messaging you for how long now? I'm so happy you come on. I'm so happy you come on because I I've watched your videos ever since like day one, probably, the original army video, that one in the trenches.
Yeah, man, it's funny that's my most viewed video of all time on YouTube, and it's like the dumbest and most meaningless. That really should tell you all you need to know about YouTube.
Yeah, I think my favorite era was kind of like Ron Paul, Socratean interview style, just destroying kind of Hillary supporter, Mitt Romney supporters, stuff like that. That was my favorite era.
Well, it's fun, but I've come to realize over a decade of activism and making every mistake possible that, making people look stupid doesn't really move the ball forward. And it's really weird when we live in an era of social media to think like, yeah, you can be successful reaching people in alternate means, because actually going out and talking to people in person is now like an alternate means of communication. And, I'm on tour right now. I'm actually stuck in Sandusky, Ohio, because our transmission on my Suburban died, and we're waiting to get it replaced right now. But, when people stop me at gas stations and they see the Freedom Mobile, it's got the Freedom logo on it in giant letters, they go, "Hey, what's Freedom?" And I say, it's this book that I wrote when I was in jail for civil disobedience. It's about how to create a more peaceful, productive, and harmonious society by dissolving government altogether. And they go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. People are really ready for this. People are receptive. And I think as a libertarian activist, a lot of what we're doing is dragging government along with public opinion. And so when people say, well, what are you doing about it? I say, well, I'm getting ready to run for president in 2020 on the platform of the peaceful, orderly, responsible dissolution of the entire United States federal government. And they go, yeah, sounds like a good first step.
Dude, this is it right here. This is the front line of resistance. I wrote an article like 3 years ago when I first got into Bitcoin, which was saying like, rather than going to protests, holding up signs, when all that Occupy Wall Street was going on, I said, you guys are wasting your time. They do not give a fuck about you. I said, if you really want to do some damage, all you do is, instead of fighting the system, which you'll never win because they have the guns, you just turn around and you walk away. And when you walk away, you leave their financial system, their world of control, their rules, and you enter a different world, the crypto world, the world of financial sovereignty. And you kill the state because, as Ron Paul said, all the state's financing comes from taking things off other people. They have nothing. They just have to take. And if you go down the financial sovereignty of crypto route, you remove their power to take money off you forcibly. It's not a pull-based system. It's a push-based system. And if they can't take money by force, then they have no revenue. They have no income. Their fiat kind of devalues, and people, look for this other system.
One of the things that I've realized over time is that we have to make things easy for people if we want to bring about significant social change. It can't be, well, we're going to change the world as soon as everybody reads this pile of books. It can't be, yeah, we're going to change the world as soon as everybody understands Austrian business cycle theory and monetary policy. And what's really exciting about Bitcoin is that it is approaching that point of mass adoption. And it's not there yet. And as big a fan of Bitcoin as I am, as practical as I want to make the case is that it already is, I'm not going to go out to the average American and say, oh yeah, it's as easy as your debit card. Although altogether, I guess at this point there's probably parity. But pretty soon, I don't know when. You guys are obviously way more up on this than I am, but we're like really, really close. A matter of years at most before we get to that point where the crypto technology is ready for mass adoption. And I think the super class, the elites in the world, they see this, and I really think they've changed. I don't think you can be raised to be the same kind of rich asshole in the age of the internet that you could before the internet. And it's really just a matter of capturing this existing sentiment and leveraging it to make change. And we make it easy for people in the electoral process. It's hard to say, all right, quit your job and start doing crypto and be an agorist and join the counter economy, when instead we can say, look, just come out and vote in this one federal election, and it will probably be the last time that you ever have to. And eventually, we're going to dissolve the state governments too, and we're going to get government completely decentralized down to the community level where your voice and your vote have a chance of mattering. Do you want that? Do you want a 30% pay raise right away for dissolving the federal government? Do you want an end to militarism, the IRS, the standing armies that you live in the middle of, in the TSA and the BLM and the FBI and the IRS? I mean, even the Department of Education has SWAT teams now. And when we can pitch it as, here, vote for this, it's going to make your life easier, then we're going to win. And we're going to win because we decided we're not going to be a debate club anymore. We're going to be a practical political force. And I think the movement is evolving to that point as well. And as I've traveled the country so far on this tour that we're about halfway through, 68 stops in 110 days, you just realize that a lot of activists are coming to the same conclusion. We don't want to argue philosophy. We don't want to argue even the role of government. If you think government should do X, okay, fine. Can it do it at the community level? Yeah. And guess what? It's going to do it a lot better at the community level than at this national level where you have a centralized power and politicians and that clearly don't give a crap about the average American.
Adam, how do you feel about the general state of polarization the state and media has been deploying as of late? The whole divide and conquer methodology we see playing out.
I think it's definitely more superficial than the mainstream media makes it out to be. And, you know, our target audience for this campaign for dissolving the federal government is not Republicans and Democrats. It's the non-voters. It's the majority of the American people who don't vote regularly because they know that it's a waste of their time. They know it's bullshit. And I think this polarization is clearly artificially generated. You know, you look at Antifa and the alt-right, you know, Nazis, and they're made into these giant specters to be afraid of. I think most people in Antifa were hired by Milo Yiannopoulos to help him with his book sales. You know, the people on the right side of that are there to fit the mainstream media narrative. You know, I mean, how many people were in Charlottesville? Not that it was insignificant in and of itself, but in the scope of American politics, it was tiny, insignificant, not even worth, you know, worrying about. And you know, we get led around by the nose by the mainstream media for people who watch the news. And I love the Jefferson quote: "Someone who reads, someone who reads newspapers is more oh man, there's like two different Jefferson quotes here. I'm mixing them up." But you know, it's like if you don't read the news, you're you're uninformed. If you read the news, you're ill-informed. And if anything, people who are plugged into mainstream media today are really buying into this bullshit false divide. And I think you're right to point out that it plays into the mainstream or the old party's hands because they want that division. They want that divide and conquer. They want to keep left and right divided because it reinforces the left-right paradigm. If you're always thinking about left and right, you're not thinking, screw that, there could be a completely different third way of not forcing everybody into the same system. You know, we don't have to be united under one central government to be united as Americans in American values and united in freedom. So yeah, absolutely, it is drummed up, it is artificial, way overinflated, and because of that, I generally do my best to ignore it. You know, I relate to people as human beings rather than as political identifiers or labels. And I know that sounds cliche to say we're going to get over it, we're just going to ignore it and move past it, but really in this case, it's a distraction. If you get distracted, you lose. But what we've done with this campaign is draw a line in the sand that I'm very confident in crossing and being on the right side of, but a lot of people who are not as open-minded, who are unfortunately committed to their positions. You know, I mean, my start in activism was Iraq Veterans Against the War. So I was there saying, you know, like I became a public figure as the guy saying, hey, you know, when we killed all those people and tortured them and destroyed their country, yeah, that was a mistake, our bad. You know, so it's really easy for me to admit when I was wrong and to adapt and to, you know, embrace adjustments in my worldview. And right now it's like, hey, decentralization, the way forward is not to say, I want to be president, because I think that's the most anti-freedom, un-American, un-libertarian thing you can say. I want to be president, and I want to force my central plan, even if it's a libertarian one, on the entire country. That's absurd. That's obviously anti-freedom. That doesn't, reach people. But when you say instead, look, let's decentralize government, it's really easy for people to say, oh yeah, decentralize, that sounds good. But when it's like, no, what that means is you get to eliminate one layer of government at a time, not one government program at a time. Because if you eliminate one government program at a time, by the time you're done killing one, two more will have grown up to take its place. So if we're really serious about achieving a harmonious, voluntary social order, a world without organized violence, then you have to look at decentralizing government down to the community level. You have to give up a bit of your ideology to say if other people want to apply their ideologies in their communities, that's okay. And so I'm kind of staking out this territory for myself, and no one else really has it in the American political scene, which is I'm the guy who's running for president in 2020 on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government. And if anybody else wanted to run on that platform who was better than me, I would say, yeah, let me drop out and endorse them and hope to be a part of their team. But, unfortunately right now, I'm all we've got. And until someone better comes along, this is the ground that I'm staking out on this side of the line in the sand, and I'm inviting as many people to join me. And the campaign right now is focused on building organization in order to win the nomination of the Libertarian Party in 2020 and to bring about some really critical changes in 2018 to make the party more about decentralization rather than philosophy. So it can go from being a debate club to a political force. So there's also the general growing nature of this idea, and that we can eventually start grabbing average Americans with much more broad messaging, but we have to win the nomination first. And I'm absolutely confident that when you put me next to any other person who claims to care about freedom to debate this cause, that the truth will win. And the truth is that America is too good for this government, and the federal government right now is absolutely unfit to exist. We have the right to alter and abolish it if we see fit. So a lot of people who have staked out a public reputation on, well, we're going to do this to the federal government, or we're going to go back to the Constitution, or whatever the case may be, it's a little difficult for them to embrace a new position. But I really don't care, because eventually everybody's going to come around to this.
Yeah, just remember what they did to Ron Paul.
What's your stance on border control?
The only legitimate borders are private property borders.
Nice.
Okay, so I just wanted to roll back while we're talking about Ron Paul. I mean, that Ron Paul campaign, he was absolutely fucking killing it. Them stadiums, the sellouts, he was so fucking killing it. And Romney, empty all the time. It's such a fucking scam that was. And Paul, he's the fucking king. He was the boss the whole time. And they just, and even all the military donations, he had all the numbers, everything. But, he wasn't the chosen one. And that was just it.
And we were organizing. I was the guy behind Veterans for Ron Paul, and I think it was a really beautiful thing. I had a lot of insider knowledge about that campaign, and it was really tragic to see how it unfolded and how Dr. Paul, I think, allowed himself to be taken advantage of. I'm not going to name names and bring up old drama, but I will say I don't think he was running to win, and that's the critical difference with our campaign. We are running to win. We will be ready to win, and the platform is to go in on day one and sign a single executive order in which I resign. I say I'm running for not president. I think that's actually more accurate than to say I'm running for president, because the first thing I'm going to do, and really the only thing that I'm going to do as president, is to sign the executive order to dissolve the federal government. There will be a process laid out in advance, that we have a legal team and a policy team working separately that will eventually be working together on this. And so assuming we win the nomination in 2020, when the American people go to the polls in November, they will have the knowledge of exactly what they are voting on as a matter of policy. The platform with the executive order will be all laid out on our website by the election, and people will see exactly what it's going to do. So I don't know what, if you guys have any other
questions. Hold up a second. Because you're talking about this as if you're seriously going to stand a chance. I mean, if Ron Paul couldn't make the nominee, I mean, what's the point in even like seriously considering that you stand a chance?
I'm running as a libertarian, not as a Republican.
Well, libertarians never do well. I mean, Gary Johnson, he had a great following. He got nowhere.
That's because Republicans have taken over the Libertarian Party for the last 3 election cycles. We had Bob Barr, then Gary Johnson, then Gary Johnson again. And these are establishment candidates who, we call them old party castaways. And what we're doing right now with this tour and organizing in 2018 is to defend the party in 2020, make sure that one of them will not be the nominee. But, the Libertarian Party has a message that really resonates with the American people. And then these old party guys come in and take over because they know how to take over the convention, because people like you, and I don't mean to call anybody out in particular here, but there are a lot more people who like to talk shit about the Libertarian Party than show up at meetings. And showing up at meetings is really easy. In fact, in order to be a delegate to the National Convention in 2016, in most states, literally all you had to do was send the chair an email and say, I'd like to be a delegate to the National Convention. Can you add me to the list? And they would add you to the list. It was not competitive at all. If you were a party member, you could just stand up and say, I want to be a delegate. And there were 100 empty seats at the beginning of the convention that still were not filled, even with alternates and people coming at the last minute, which means that if just 100 people appropriately distributed throughout the states had showed up to their state party conventions and said, I want to be a delegate and I'm going to vote for someone who's not a washed-up Republican, then Austin Peterson or John McAfee or Darryl Perry would have been the nominee of the Libertarian Party, and we wouldn't have someone going out there saying, I'm the best of both worlds, I'm socially liberal and fiscally conservative, to which the American people say, yeah, the best of both shit worlds that we don't want to have anything to do with. So if you do want a chance, you do have to get credibility in the mainstream of American politics. The Libertarian Party represents enough of a platform, because so many activists like myself have busted their butts building it over the last 50 years, that we can have that credibility right away by winning the nomination, and then we can reach the American people with a message and a platform that shows them we're serious. It's time for the adults to come in and take charge, and no more playing around. We've got a solution as big as the problem. This is it.
Yeah, I agree.
Seriously.
Actually, I'll tell you guys, I guess this is on the record, but I'll say it off the record. We have someone much better who we're talking to right now, and I don't want to make any promises on her behalf, but I'll just say that we are talking to her, and her name is Cynthia McKinney, who you might recall is the former black female congresswoman from Georgia who was also the Green Party nominee for president, who may be ready for 2020 to get on board with the platform of dissolving the federal government, which makes this an incredible unity platform and a unity campaign. And it really should be, because dissolving government down to the community level means everybody gets what they want. You want this in your community, you can have it, as long as you don't force it on any other community. And so, I think bringing someone with that kind of demographic credibility and ideological credibility and really integrity that Cynthia McKinney brings, as she demonstrated in her opposition to the Iraq War before I even went, the way that she questioned Donald Rumsfeld and other government officials during the Iraq War was exemplary. I've met her a couple times. I've interviewed her a couple times. When I interviewed her in, I think it was back in 2012 or 2013, she was really coming around to the ideals of voluntarism anyway. And whereas when I interviewed Jesse Ventura, I don't know if anybody's seen that, but he demonstrated that he has, when it comes to political issues and things that he disagrees with, he has a relatively low ability to maintain his composure. And I find that I'm trying to be polite about this, but I find that somewhat disconcerting. Also, not particularly open-minded to philosophy. Although, if Jesse Ventura were to come out and say, "Yeah, Adam's right, we'd be better off without the federal government entirely," I would say, "Absolutely, brother, you are on the right side of the line in the sand. Let's see what we can do to get you involved."
Adam, can you promise us as a candidate you will reinvestigate 9/11?
Oh, I got you one better there. Hold on a second. Wait.
Will you lock up Hillary?
We won't have to. We won't have to. Actually, one of the nice things about dissolving the federal government is that everybody who's in federal prison for political crimes or victimless crimes is immediately pardoned and released. That means Ross Ulbricht, Schaefer
Oh, dude,
Cox,
I'm voting for you.
so many others immediately released. And then there's a process, of course, of transitioning inmates that should be locked up to state governments.
But Kokesh, come on. You're trying to beat them at their own game. You're not going to be able to do it. They've got the mainstream media, interests. It's their game. It's their rules. You're just not going to be able to beat them at it. And besides that, the actual idea of what we're talking about here is way, way outside the spectrum of like your average everyday Joe American. They eat at the diner.
Hold on,
and do their normal shit.
Can I go back to the 9/11 thing and then address that? Because when I said I'll do you one better, I didn't mean the thing about the inmates. I actually meant that a lot of people have said you can't just send everybody home right away. You have to line up all the IRS agents in a room and cut all their right hands off first to make sure that they never come back, and we learn the lessons. But this is about forgiveness, so that's not what I'm talking about, no. But we're not going to just abolish the federal government. When we say dissolve, we mean it very precisely, because one of the things that we're going to do in the orderly dissolution of the federal government is release all of the records that we possibly can. And in order to do that, there has to be a process of redacting private information that should not be made public. But basically, as soon as we can do that, every government record is going up on the internet. You will know the truth about 9/11, the JFK assassination, the Gulf of Tonkin, the Lusitania, and all the crap that the government is working on now that you don't know about yet, that you wouldn't find out until decades later when it comes out. So we finally get to find out whether or not the Earth is round or flat. I think that's a really important question for a lot of Americans. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I can't stop making fun of the flat Earth thing, because it's mind-boggling how that became a thing. I watched just when I realized it was becoming a real thing. I saw Berwick interviewed someone about it, and I watched like the first 30 seconds, and I could feel myself getting dumber, and I had to stop. But anyway, we release all of the records publicly online, which means that we remember the lessons of history. We get to learn the lessons of history and do our best to make sure that we never repeat them. But as for your challenge, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not. I don't know where to follow people's names or see who's speaking. But I wasn't watching when I didn't know I could watch. I didn't see what I was looking at, so I don't know who was talking earlier. But the question of will you be able to pull this off? And it's really easy to be pessimistic. I mean, it's a great justification for staying at home and giving up. But people have said that about every major social change. Oh, it's impossible. Oh, that can't happen. And if anything, I would say we're behind in terms of public sentiment, that by and large, and this is, everybody who says, oh, Adam, the American people aren't ready for this. I go, where are you getting that? And it's like, oh, from the internet. So you don't go out and talk to regular people like I do. So how could you make that assertion? Are you looking at surveys? Are you looking at objective data? Or are you making personal observations? And when it comes to the internet, when you're looking at public chats, I mean, even this one, not everybody who was in here is verified. You don't check IDs, and even then, you couldn't keep out a government troll. But we know that the Department of Defense put in one of their acquisition budgets a request for sock puppet software that would allow one person to control multiple accounts in order to comment spam sections and sway public opinion and make it look like it's more pro-government than it really is. And even with governments doing that, we saw the exposure of the Russian propaganda house where they were doing exactly this. The Russian government had hundreds of people employed in one building doing nothing but comment spamming. And if you go based on that, the conversation on the internet is really polluted, and it's really slanted to look more pro-government than it is. And when you go out and talk to people on the street, you realize that that doesn't represent reality. That doesn't represent how most Americans think. And if anything, I would say they're ready for this. So I have no delusions about the probability. And if you guys want to hear the long-term plans, I can make it really quick here, because I believe if there is no black swan moment of awakening, and I think that there will be soon, and I think it's coming with the internet. I have some ways that even I could bring it about with my book. If I just had $86 million, I could put a copy of my book in every single mailbox in America. That's just one crazy idea. But Even without anything crazy like that happening, we see how people are waking up in a way that they don't go back to sleep. And when that shift comes, we're going to be ready. We're going to be ready to win, running to win, and we will have that executive order in place. So if we don't have any special breakthroughs between now and 2020, I think it's reasonable to assume that winning the nomination, we can get somewhere between 5 and 10% of the vote. And that's enough, if we run a respectable campaign, to plant the flag on this idea that America is too good for this government, that we don't have to be united under one government to be united as Americans, that we'd be better off without the federal government entirely, that nobody for president was an option. And then every time the federal government screws up between 20 and 24, and I think that's a pretty safe bet that they'll screw up something, I get to be the guy saying, hey, if you had voted for me, that agency would not even exist right now. And I'm very confident that if we're able to maintain this, and this is a long-term campaign, in 24, again, with no special black swan moments, I think in 24, we'll be polling, somewhere around 20, 25%. I think that's a very reasonable expectation. I'll bet if we had a serious campaign, like a well-funded national campaign right now, and we were doing regular polling, probably by 2020, we could shift public opinion to get 25% of the American people to vote for dissolving the federal government. And then in the next election, whether it's 24 or 28, that's when we're going to win. And I am going to run on this platform until the federal government ceases to exist one way or another, whether it's by a collapse, which would be horrific, or by a platform like this, which is essentially doing it the easy way. We want to tell the American people, look, you can do this the easy way or the hard way. And the hard way is to keep your head buried in the sand and hope that government spares you in its violent death throes as it desperately clings to power in a collapse. The easy way is to embrace a solution as big as the problem, and that's what we're offering people.
Well, I disagree. Sorry to interrupting. Actually, I am outsider, not in US, never was in US, but I am living in a lot of places around the world. And from at least my observations, I believe that these changes you are talking about actually not possible in the way we are living right now, and it is all beginning with the education. So if you look at education right now, at the children which are learning at schools, universities, the education which they are receiving, it's completely for this environment in which we are living. So
sure.
If we want to change something, it's not going to be like, okay, I am as the party will issue this order or whatsoever. It should be like the people have to evolve at first, and it should begin with the education. However, right now, no system in the world is interested in education at all. And because of that, we see the generations which are coming, the young people, they completely not interested in life at all. I mean, they're interested in games, in cars, I don't know, in anything else, but not in the politics or in making the life easier or the better way. It's better to make the Angry Birds or with spinner, but not.
What you base?
Well, hold on. If I may address that, I'd like to say that you're completely right in one sense and completely wrong in another sense. And one is that you're right to point out that your observations about education and the impact of that. And you're right that in order for a platform like this to be successful, there has to be a certain shift in how people think. I would argue that shift has already happened, and that shift is not an understanding of freedom or even an understanding of government. It's simply part of the internet effect, which is an understanding that we don't have to do it that way just because we've always done it that way. And if you look at the politics of the world right now, we have a global secession movement afoot. You have Brexit, the Scottish vote, the movement in Catalonia. in the United States. You have the state of Jefferson, the 51st State Project in Colorado, the independence movement in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Texas, and Alaska. California wants to split off now. California splitting into 6 different states. We are no longer bound by this thinking of tradition, and just because it's always been that way, that's how it has to be. So I would say that the important part of that educational shift has already taken place. And when it comes to implementing it in politics, this is where I'd say you're totally wrong, in that we don't have to educate everyone about federal policy and the plan to dissolve the federal government and blah, 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 or even the philosophy behind it, or voluntarism or libertarianism, or change their political thinking. We're saying America is too good for this government. You can pledge allegiance all day long. You can wave the flag as much as you want. That doesn't challenge what I'm saying at all. You can be miseducated in nationalism and patriotism and think that that's bootlicking. Fine, it doesn't matter. We've got a way around that, because what we're doing is no longer, as a political movement, based on changing the paradigm. It's based on creating a practical policy that immediately improves everyone's life. You don't have to teach people anything about politics to say, hey, will you come out and vote once for a 30% pay raise because we're going to end the IRS? Hey, will you come out and vote once because we're going to make your life better right away? Can you come out and vote once? We're not going to put any people in jail for victimless crimes anymore. We're going to end the drug war. And more importantly, no more daylight saving time. For some reason, that's the biggest selling point of this campaign. But I think, just as exciting, with 50 independent states, the Olympics will be that much more competitive.
Scaling back property tax after the dissolution of the government is part of your plan, right?
I'm sorry, say that again, please?
Is scaling back property tax and eventually eliminating it part of your platform?
I cannot say that that's part of my platform for this campaign, because I am asking for the consent of the American people to basically go in as a bankruptcy agent or a trustee to dissolve the agency that is the federal government of the United States of America. Most property taxes are collected, as far as I know, at the county level. That's where mine come from. I know there are municipal property taxes as well. So while I can say that in my ideal vision of a society that would be based on respect for private property, you would not have to pay a tax to own property at all. But is that part of my platform in this campaign? Absolutely not, because I don't pretend to overstep the bounds of the authority that I would be taking on.
Can you promise to the people here that you will
dissolving the federal government?
I'm sorry, there was someone talking over. Can you say that again, please?
What time frame do you have in mind to dissolve the U.S. federal government orderly?
That's a great question, and I hate to admit that right now I only have the rough outline of an answer.
That's exactly what I'm asking for.
Okay,
just roughly.
Okay, yeah, because like I said, we have a policy team and a legal team that are working together right now to develop this executive order, and then even then we would only have an estimate of how long it would take. But first, with this executive order, we're declaring the federal government of no authority. It is a custodial organization for managing the transition. So immediately, all of the laws on the books by the federal government are unenforceable, moot, done. That part happens immediately. As for the federal workforce, with the military, this is the biggest challenge. Bringing the troops home from abroad, closing the foreign military bases, that's really easy. Allowing the states to claim their share of defensive resources, not the offensive resources, but the legitimate defensive resources. There's going to be a process for that may take years. For most federal agencies, you get to send 95+% of the personnel home immediately. Their 2-month notice is at the election in November. Their marching date is when we sign this executive order, and they're done. They go home. That's it. Then the creating of the archive process, the handling of the physical properties, all of that might take 2 or 3 years. But then there's also going to be a long tail, especially with the military, with the liquidation of the assets. And one of the things I talk about is privatization, if you guys don't mind me getting into it, because I'm a veteran, you know, talking about the VA. We got 20 veterans committing suicide every day in America. Obviously, the VA does not exist to take care of veterans. It exists to make it look like the government takes care of veterans. So what do we do with the VA? There's no reason it shouldn't exist. It just can't be funded by taxes. So we spin it off as a private charity and give every single veteran in America one ownership voting share. Because I guarantee when you put those resources in the hands of veterans, you're not going to have 20 veterans committing suicide every day. So this is privatization in the sense of we're going to put resources in the hands of people who actually have an interest in them. And then there's the process of localization. Department of Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, agencies that provide specific functions that we want to be able to continue will be transitioned down to the state governments. And so I imagine most of that will take place in 2 to 3 years. I really believe that of the process of the material process of dissolving the federal government, somewhere around 80% of it will be done in that first 2 to 3 year period. And then there will be a long tail which in the cases of some agencies may last indefinitely. For example, creating a national archive might be done through the Library of Congress, which would get an endowment to carry that out, hypothetically indefinitely. And so the National Archive would last forever. The VA would last until every current veteran is dead or no longer in need of medical care. And what we do with the remaining assets when we liquidate the federal government is we fund Social Security until those funds run out. And I can't say exactly how long that would take, but it'll vary agency by agency, and as appropriate to do so in a peaceful, orderly, responsible manner, we're going to take the appropriate time.
Sounds awesome. The only thing I would do is keep the U.S. government alive only through the U.S. Postal Service, but that's about it.
Well, we can spin the Postal Service off as a private business. There's no problem with that. I think it should be maintained as such.
Yeah, again, as an outsider, excuse me, again interrupting, I have the question. You are mentioning that you are going to pull all the bases and the forces outside the world. And what do you think will happen at that, in this 2 months period which you are mentioning, when all US forces and the bases are closed and the soldiers returned? How do you think what will happen all over the places where they was?
Well, just like in the United States, you're going to see a division between the people who were parasites on the system, the people who benefited from the American foreign military presence, mostly people attached to foreign governments. But you're also going to see contractors. You're going to see the personnel who who cleaned the barracks on the bases and served food and drive trucks for the U.S. military abroad, things like that. You're going to see them complaining about losing their jobs. But I think overall,
no, excuse me again, interrupting. Maybe
no
I
problem.
didn't explain me properly. My question was related to the places in which these forces are residing now. I mean, imagine in Afghanistan you have the base, okay, and you are pulling it out. I mean, I don't care how you are going to resolve these people, what kind of the job are you going to give them at home, but what will happen in the Afghanistan itself? What will happen in the Iraq? What will happen, I mean, in all other places, in Europe, however 800 bases which US have across the globe? I mean, in the end of the day, what will be the result of this to the world in general? That was my question.
Well, that's a pretty big question, and part of the point of the message of freedom is that I don't want to run other people's lives for them. What's going to happen in Iraq when there's no U.S. military presence? They're going to be that much more free. Same thing with every other country in the world. They'll be able to get on with their lives without the interference of the American military empire. There will be some negative short-term changes, but I'm absolutely confident in making the case that overall the benefit is positive, and that when you ask the women in Fallujah who are giving birth to children at the rate of a quarter of them having horrific disfigurements for birth defects from depleted uranium and white phosphorus poisoning, I don't think they're going to be worried that that kind of evil is never going to be visited upon the earth again.
What's your plan to do with the Chinese?
What do we do with the Chinese?
Yep.
Let them be Chinese?
Good answer. Can you?
I mean, you know, all this business of overfishing waters and building artificial islands with military installations and such.
Well, from the American perspective, I think the best thing we can do to defend ourselves from the Chinese is get rid of the American government's financial system that's selling out this country to their financial interests, because ultimately political power follows centers of economic power. Of course, it tries to control and manipulate them. But since China is becoming the greater economic center, of course, the American government is selling out America to the Chinese. But if you say, what do we do about another government outside of our country behaving badly, we set the example. You know, what's the rest of the world going to do when they see that America has dissolved our federal government and we're that much freer and safer and more prosperous? The people in those countries are going to be rushing to do the same thing to their governments.
So, Gogesh, I mean, with regards to what you just said, the best thing we could do for the Chinese is get rid of our American financial system. I mean, isn't crypto the ideal vessel vehicle to do that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it is the single most important thing happening in the world right now, that is the most underreported story of all time, that cryptocurrencies are about to displace fiat currencies all over the world. And when they do, it's going to make my job a heck of a lot easier.
I so agree, man.
Well, I was going to say that I honestly think that, you know, what makes the world turn around is money. And that's why it's like the most important thing in our society. You know, people can't live without it. They need to get it. They need to trade it. It's where the state gets all its financing from. You know, it's what you were talking about with the collapse. And really, Bitcoin and crypto is the absolute key. It is the keystone that holds the bridge up that's going to make everything work. And that's why I think shilling... Who the fuck's mic is that? But that's why I think shilling crypto is like the most important thing anybody can be doing.
Well, I definitely think it's an important part of this campaign message. And I'm actually kind of surprised none of you have asked the question yet. What am I going to do with the Federal Reserve System?
Bitcoin, close it down.
Well, first one is...
Close that shit down.
Actually, I wrote you to discuss this.
First one's got to be audit it, as per Ron Paul's legacy. Find out where the money's gone that they said, we don't know where it's gone.
Shut it down.
Actually, I think all of your answers are wrong, because there is a simple libertarian answer to basically every question of this nature, right? And if I were to put the question to you, how soon should the dollar die? The answer would be, let the market decide. And if the American people or the people of the world are voluntarily using the US dollar and we remove the violent backing of the federal government from it, who are we to say, no, you cannot use the US dollar, or that the private institution known as the Federal Reserve System has to be submitted to an audit? It really doesn't matter. But more importantly, policy-wise, what's going to happen if the dollar is already on its way out by then? Now, I use myself as a little example here because I still use the dollar for most, maybe not most things, but for a lot of things. You know, it's kind of unavoidable in all the business that I'm doing. But I do as much of my business as possible. Like I said, I already pay all of my staff in Bitcoin. I do as much as possible in barter and other cryptocurrencies. And I don't have any savings enumerated in dollars. My savings are metals and cryptos and land. If 51% of the American public said we are ready to dissolve the federal government, how many of them would have already made the shift to this lifestyle? And if that happens before we win on this platform, it could be that by the time we win, the dollar has already collapsed, in which case all I'm doing is going in to clean up the mess and pick up the pieces. And we are going to be liquidating the federal government in Bitcoin.
I have a question.
Hit me.
So you witnessed Commander Mattis stand over a bridge over the Euphrates and allow women and children to cross, but not males 14 and over?
I got you one better. I didn't see Mattis there. I saw Mattis at the base that I was running a checkpoint at later, but I actually went out on that bridge in April of 2004. We called it the Brooklyn Bridge. Of the two bridges over the Euphrates, we called the other one the Washington. That is in the George Washington and the Brooklyn bridges. And it was the George Washington where the 4 Blackwater security agents were, after crossing into the city, they were ambushed and had their bodies strung up and burned on the Northern Bridge. And I actually ran that checkpoint for several days when that was the policy. And my directive was, if the men look old enough to be in your fighting hole, then they are not going to be allowed out of the city. And we generally said the cutoff was somewhere between 13 and 16 years old.
I got a question for you.
Oh, I thought you were going somewhere with that, though.
No, I just wanted to, I just wanted to hear it from your mouth what happened. I noticed on your website, you have your Bitcoin donation link, so I posted a link to that there. But there's no QR code, so maybe it'd be a little bit easier to send you Bitcoin if there was a QR code posted on your website.
I'll get right on that.
So I actually sent you a little message in TeamSpeak about the website stuff. But my question is this. So whenever we see somebody with some, like a non-establishment political platform, they typically get drowned out in the media, and they don't really get their message out to anyone. Like, what's your strategy to actually get heard and to get noticed and to play, the media fucking ball game so that your message can get to people?
Well, so far we're actually doing pretty well on this. We've already got a well built up team now of people doing media outreach for me. First on this tour, going out helping me get radio interviews in cities before I get there. We have people who are building a database of all the online media. Part of my answer to you is we don't really have to, because we have modern independent media on the internet. And the fact that I can go in with my history and my existing social media presence allows me to have a media coordinator send an email to most blogs, podcasts, video channels on the internet. I'm not saying YouTube anymore, video channels on the internet, and say, hey, we have this guy, he's running for president on this platform, would you interview him? And that's already more than enough to keep me busy right now. So it's really just about turning that up and working my way up to bigger and bigger independent online media platforms. And I really think those are more important than the mainstream media. If you said, Adam, you get a choice for the rest of your life, you get to do either mainstream media or independent media interviews, I know that I would reach more people saying, yeah, cut me off from the mainstream. When it comes to the mainstream, though, we are already at the point where this movement is an undeniable political force. And, I was able to just call a reporter who covered my congressional race in 2010 in New Mexico, who writes for the biggest newspaper in New Mexico. And I know that's not saying much, but I said, hey, would you interview me about this campaign? I'd love to be featured in the newspaper again. And he said, yeah, no problem. We were on the phone for an hour, and he wrote a very fair, and I would say even at this point, extremely favorable article about this. So the main thing is to say, yeah, we're going to focus on the internet rather than mainstream old media. But we are already well established enough to have a decent footing in the old media. And when we win the nomination, obviously that's going to be a lot easier. And as much as we like to complain that Ron Paul was blacked out, you look at Gary Johnson, the media presence that he was able to get. You look at the media presence that Ron Paul was able to get. I mean, his campaign was based on free earned media that he got because the mainstream media couldn't avoid covering him. They blacked him out at certain critical times, but overall, he proved that when you're able to mount that kind of political effort, the mainstream media really can't ignore you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, good answer.
Cookies, get that information about the aliens out. I want to know all about Area 51, Roswell.
That JFK shit too, man. Get that thing unsealed.
Dude, I want to.
Building
Yeah.
7. Hey, you guys, I posted this meme, and I just have to share it because it's friggin' hilarious. And I wish I could remember the comedian's name, but he said, "I like my women the way I like my Building 7, going down for no reason."
Yeah.
That's a conspiracy. Hey, that's some conspiracy humor that 9 out of 11 people won't get because it's an inside joke.
Dude, 90% of people in here are fucking anarchist conspiracy. But yeah, I mean, Building 7, first plane ever to be destroyed by fire, falls at full speed, was never hit. Get fucking real.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, I mean, the writing's on the wall. We already, everybody in here knows the goddamn truth. So
yeah, that was not
rather than waste
fucking
time
right.
with that. Where can I purchase a hard copy of your book? Oh,
there it is, thefreedomline.com. I just put it in the chat. And just so you know, a little secret, every book that we send out as a single copy is signed from our store. Although I don't know, we might be out now that I've been on tour for a while. And every bulk order, because we sell the books as close to at cost as we can get away with. Every bulk order of books comes with at least one signed copy. But hey, you guys should come out if you're on the East Coast or the southern half of the United States. We haven't hit that part of the tour yet, so come out to one of our events. And I'll put that link in here too, the link to our calendar.
Dude, when's the West Coast? When's the West Coast coming?
Oh, we already hit the West Coast.
Oh,
that's all right. Are you guys, any of y'all going to the Nexus conference?
Don't even know what it is.
You guys know what Nexus is? Nexus Coin? Nexus Earth?
No, I thought it was a phone. Google Nexus.
Yeah, I know about it.
So there's a big conference with Ron Paul and Jesse Ventura and Peter Schiff and myself and a lot of people in the crypto space in Aspen, Colorado. I believe it's the 20th or the 18th to the 22nd. And so coming up real soon here, but it's a really cool event. I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll be there on Friday the 22nd.
That sounds great. Good location too. Mountains, weed, snowboarding,
That's
skiing.
a pain in the butt to get to, though. I have to fly to Denver. I can't fly into whatever. You guys don't need to hear about my logistics challenges, but I got to fly back. I'm flying in for less than 24 hours and then going back to speak at an Audit the Fed rally in Boston.
Adam, if you're a convicted felon, how can you run for president?
Because the presidency is a constitutional office, the only requirements for the job are those laid out in the Constitution. I was born in San Francisco. I'm a natural-born U.S. citizen, 35 years of age or older, and I am a felon, which means I'm allowed to run for president, but in my home state of Arizona, I'm not allowed to vote. The memes for this are going to be so dank.
fuck yes. The next meme presidency.
All right, well, thanks, gentlemen. And if there's a time to come back here, I look forward to it. Peace out.
You go, guys.